Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology. What's that? That's the study of books and reading and notebooks and writing mixed with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. Here, you'll find episodes exploring the reading and writing life and how they can make our actual lives better. You'll get book recommendations and notebooking prompts around particular themes, and you'll even hear from authors and special guests who can fuel our reading and writing hearts and help us take inspired action in our own daily practices. So, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I'm Stephanie, your podcast host and bookologist, here with another episode on how reading and writing can make life better. Today, we are talking about something that I have not yet discussed on the podcast ever in the over 150 episodes that I have been chatting with you. I think this episode is perfect for this time of year. The weather is cooler. We are snuggling into our homes more. We are getting ready for the holiday season, which typically means gathering together and focusing on family and friendship and food. Do you know what genre I'm getting ready to talk about today? It's cookbooks. Cookbooks. Today we are talking all about cookbooks on the Get Literate podcast. But we are not just talking about cookbooks for their typical purpose, which is to give us wonderful recipes to create. We're, of course, talking about how cookbooks can make life better. And not just make life better because we're eating some delicious food. We're going to talk about the ways that cookbooks can actually be read as self-care tools. So, what is a cookbook? Well, traditionally, a cookbook is simply a collection of recipes. That's it, right? Think back to the old cookbooks that you remember using in your own childhood, and they're basically just a collection of recipes. There's a table of contents, and they're usually organized by appetizers or soups or salad or entrees or breakfast, lunch, dinners, dessert, etc. And on the page, you simply have the title at the top, the recipe that fills the rest, and sometimes an image of what you can create. It's a very simple idea, right? A cookbook is a book filled with things to cook. But fast forward to now. If we fast forward to now, cookbooks are so much more than that. Yes, they are collections of recipes. Yes, they are divided up into the different categories of things that we can make. And yes, there still likely is a picture of the food that we can ultimately consume. But there is so much more. Now, if you were to open up a cookbook published recently, you'd likely find anecdotal information about the recipe, where the author was when he or she found it, ate it first, created it, and recreated it. You may have elements of memoir written throughout the cookbook, showing a journey not just of food, but of life. You may have nonfiction snippets about the different ingredients that are on the page, where they're from, where you can get them, how they're important. You may even have information about the cultures and the different traditions that the food embodies. And I have found that some of the most enjoyable cookbooks are the books that do a little bit of all of those things. I was reading an article recently on Book Riot, and it said, we're not going to read cookbooks as cookbooks. We want to read cookbooks as books. And that's what I want to talk about today. How can you read cookbooks as books? And how might they matter to our health and wellness and just feeling good? I'm all about reading and writing, making life better. And so today we're really going to talk about this microgenre of sorts of how cookbooks can actually be tools for self-growth and self-care. Now, I feel like I should admit right at the top of the episode that I love reading cookbooks as book books. In fact, I don't read cookbooks as cookbooks. I don't read them with any expectation that I am going to make something from them because I am just not a good cook. And maybe it's not that I'm not a good cook, I just don't cook. I don't really enjoy it. Instead of getting flooded with, sights and smells and textures and putting me into a nice meditative zone, I am stressed. I am stressed about what I'm supposed to cook and when I'm supposed to cook it. And if I'm cooking something else at the same time, if it's the right consistency, where do my measuring cups go? Do I have all the ingredients? It just stresses me out. But I do enjoy the idea of the cookbooks, of reading the cookbooks. The same goes for all of these cooking shows. I watch them all. I especially love the baking ones. I don't actually do the cooking. I'll likely do the baking, but not the cooking. And I've realized in thinking about my reading life, and of course, in preparing for this episode, that cooking the recipes that are in the cookbook, I don't think it's the point. I personally don't think it's the point for me. Some people might get great joy out of actually bringing that recipe to life in their kitchen from the page, but that's not why I'm in for it. For me, it's the idea of what that recipe represents. It's the idea of what it represents. I could make it, but I don't have to in order to enjoy the idea of someone else making it or learning where the recipe came from and what traditions it embraces or where those ingredients are sourced or the story or the journey that the author took in bringing it to me. I find my joy there. And so I've realized that reading cookbooks as book books, it can give us a couple of different things, and it depends on the kind of person that we are to take away the particular kind of self-care that might be best for us. So for some of us, cookbooks could be self-care because it actually brings us the spark to cook. And cooking, for some, is joyful. And it's fun and it's meditative and it's relaxing and it's just an experience that you really want to embrace. So that's kind of a very tangible level of how cookbooks could be self-care because they're sparking you to engage in an activity that you like for no reason at all other than to enjoy the process and ultimately the nice product that you get at the end. Now, some people might come to the cookbooks because they want ideas around the gathering. They are all about the event, the friends, the family, the purpose. And reading those cookbooks, especially the ones today where we can see images of the authors, the recipe authors, family and friends and gatherings really enjoying that. We can see how the table was set. We can see how the food was styled. We can see how it was essential to the gathering and community around it. That may be the thing for some of us. You love to gather, and looking through cookbooks gives you ideas to make that gathering special. Whether you make it or not, or you buy it or not, or someone brings it or not, the cookbook gives you the spark for how you could come together with your people. And then third, what I think cookbooks do, and I love this too, is it gives us a window into different cultures and traditions than our own, right? We likely have a stack of our favorite recipes somewhere. And by the way, if you want ideas on how to really savor them and save them, then you should come into my Patreon community because this week we talked about that very thing. But we have our own recipes and ideas that are our go-tos. We read cookbooks to get new ideas and new go-tos. But beyond that, I think cookbooks give us new ideas and go-tos, yes, related to food, but also related to different cultures and traditions for us to try on and explore, right? It's not just our family recipes, it's someone else's family. It's someone else's tradition. It's, oh, I didn't know that I could do that, that that was a thing, that that could bring people closer together. So I feel like reading cookbooks as book books gives us a couple of different alternatives. One, it sparks us to engage in the act of self-care through the actual physical cooking. Two, it sparks us to think about the context around that cooking and give us ideas and inspiration for gathering together with our own people, which is a form of self-care and building community. And three, it gives us a window into something else. It broadens our own circles of what's possible for us, which, of course, growth is a wonderful form of self-care. So today, I want to go into what I am officially calling a micro genre, cookbooks as self-care. Cookbooks as self-growth, cookbooks as catalysts for transformation, cookbooks that we read like book books to make life better. So I want to share 5 books that have been doing this for me recently in hopes that it just sparks you to either get out all of your cookbooks and look at them in a different light, or, of course, treat yourself to a new one as we head into this holiday season. So the first one I want to talk about, I have mentioned on the podcast before because I love it, especially because it's not about cooking, it's about baking. This first cookbook is called Mind Over Batter: 75 Recipes for Baking as Therapy by Jack Hazan. So it is labeled a self-care cookbook for using baking as therapy. And the author or the recipe gatherer or the baker is actually a licensed psychotherapist. And inside the book, there are 75 different recipes that help you heal in whatever way you want to heal based on whatever you might happen to be going through. So they are inspired by his Syrian and Middle Eastern culture that he grew up with. So again, we've got a whole nother layer of self-care of opening our mind to something different. And of course, there's some classical American desserts in there, but the recipes are organized into themed chapters based on some of our common life moments and some of our needs. So here are 3 examples. If you're in need of connection, you might make some pesto pull-apart bread to share with your loved ones. If you're looking for a way to release some anxiety, you might knead away your stress with a chocolate babka crunch. Or if you are simply in need of some self-care, you can whip up a single serving indulgence like a devil's food mug cake. So good. And the best part is that in between these recipes, there are these little exercises and quick sessions that connect baking to the evidence-based therapy tools that the author uses in his practice every day. It really is the best of all of my worlds: personal growth, transformation, and baking. So Mind Over Batter: 75 Recipes for Baking as Therapy by Jack Hazan might be a cookbook you decide to pick up this season and start baking, not only for your self-care and your mental health, but then to share with everyone around you. Now, the second one I want to share is a book called Baking by Feel: Recipes to Sort Out Your Emotions, Whatever They Are Today by Becca Ray Tucker. So in this book, it's a guide, so to speak. It's a guide to identifying and processing our emotions, but in the kitchen. So it's organized by 5 emotional states, 5 emotions that we all typically go through on a range of categories. There's happy, sad, mad, anxious, and hopeful. And inside the book, there are 65 recipes. They're each paired with emotion and some really beautiful photographs. So, for example, if you are feeling awkward, you might try some kitchen sink cookies because they're made up of a little bit of everything, but they somehow turn out great. Are you having an optimistic moment? You can enjoy something like a cardamom caramel poke cake. Gosh, that one sounds good. Are you struggling with a moody moment? The thick and chewy maple cookies with their zing of sweet heat might be perfect for you. And if you're feeling lost and you're just craving some comfort and something familiar, then you can go to Becca's Instagram famous brownies. Now, this book is gorgeous. So it is about the emotion and it is about the recipes. There are multiple recipes for each of those 5 emotions that I've talked about. But there's such a wonderful layout. And there's pictures of the author. There are charts of all the emotions with these little blobs of feelings. There are pages where some are just different flavors of the words. And of course, there are the actual recipes themselves with the images so that you can see what you're getting yourself into when you are baking it. So that's Baking by Feel, Recipes to Sort Out Your Emotions, Whatever They Are Today by Becca Ray Tucker. Now, next up, oh, this one is powerful. This one is called Stir, My Broken Brain and the Meals That Brought Me Home by Jessica Fechter. Now, this book is a memoir and it is beautiful. It is a memoir about how food connects us to ourselves, to our lives, and to each other. So, this is definitely a cookbook that reads like a book because it is memoir in its typical sense. There is a lot of narrative here that shows you how the author used food and recipes for her own healing. So, this author, when she was 28, everything was going well. And then she went for a run and an aneurysm burst in her brain. She nearly died. She lost her sense of smell, the sight in her left eye, and she was just forced to abandon the life that she loved and thought was going so well and on track. For her, her journey to recovery began in the kitchen. As soon as she could stand at the stove and stir, there she was. She calls it the restorative power of cooking and baking, and it tells her story from that moment on. Now, the recipe part comes because there are 27 different recipes that could comfort and delight. So, this is such a beautiful memoir that shows how food was so important to her self care and healing, how cooking, I should say, was important to her self care and healing. And we get those 27 recipes that really mattered to her. Oh, such a powerful one. That one is Stir. Now, up next, book 4 is called The Kitchen Healer, The Journey to Becoming You by Jules Blaine Davis. And I love the opening line that the publisher uses to hook readers in here. Look at your relationships with your kitchen, and you discover the unconscious recipe guiding your life. I'm going to read that one more time. Look at your relationship with your kitchen, and you discover the unconscious recipe guiding your life. It's like I always say, if you look at your own personal so-called rules that you have set for your reading and writing life, you can find out a lot about your actual life. And Jules is saying, look at how you work within your kitchen, and you'll find the unconscious recipe guiding your life. I love it. So in this book, she asked the question of readers, what are you really hungry for? Right? Not literally with the food, but figuratively. What are we really hungry for? So, this is a book that will help you, according to the publisher, shine a light on how to cook up the life you deeply long to live with the food you love to make. I just can't stop dropping the one-liners from the overview of this book because it's what hooked me in completely. And so this cookbook is organized by parts. Part 1, waking up, the stories we carry. Part 2, turning on the fire. Part 3, healing in the kitchen, cooking up a life you love. And part 4, becoming you, a forever conversation. This book truly reads like a book. There are gorgeous pictures. There's some beautiful lyrical, I would almost say, language about how our kitchen and our cooking lives connects to our actual life. And I feel like all of the kitchen advice provided is simply life advice. And then along the way, we get some information about the author's story as well, which helps us to connect to our own. And of course, recipes, right? There's poetry, there's recipes, there's permission slips. There are so many things in here that will just invite you to settle in for a little bit, including heart work. So this is something I've never seen a cookbook have. This heart work is where you take a pause, you relax, you breathe a little bit, and you just feel, right? And the author says you might read something here that inspires something else to open. Follow the desire to explore your story. This is what heart work is for. It's a loving space to be with your heart and what it needs to tell you. And so she offers these heart work sparks in between all of this other beauty, all of this other cooking ideas and these wonderful recipes. It truly is a self-help personal transformation book, I would say, in the disguise of a cookbook. So that's The Kitchen Healer, The Journey to Becoming You by Jules Blaine Davis. Now, last but not least, I have The Year of Miracles, Recipes About Love and Grief and Growing Things by Ella Risbridger. This book is about a year in the kitchen. And I love books that take us on a journey like this. I love Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness Project. I just love books that show us what a year of growth might look like in the thing that lights you up. And for this author, this cookbook is about a year in the kitchen, and she says in the garden under the fire escape steps. But it's a year in the kitchen paralleled with grief and hope and change. So among the cardamom cinnamon chicken rice, the chimichurris, the carb soups, the blackberry miso birthday cake, the sticky toffee, among all of those yummy recipes, there is a year of loss, a year of every kind of romance, right? A year of falling in love, a year of recipes, a year of minor miracles. Food, recipes, cooking does not exist in isolation of our life. And this book is a beautiful reminder of it. The cover is gorgeous. It's this hand sketched, I'm not sure if it's watercolor or what it is, but it is just beautiful. And it is, for me, openly calming. I can't help but just take a deeper breath when I look at this cover. There are 67 recipes in here, and the way it's organized is by month. So in the winter before, there's leftovers pie. In January, there's another set of recipes. In February, another. March, another. And so she moves through the year based on the journey she's taking and what she is actually cooking. And so you have this beautiful parallel story of love and grief and growing things along with the recipes that she provides. I mean, come on, if I haven't convinced you yet, isn't this the most fun microgenre we haven't yet explored on the podcast? I really love getting into these micro genres and really getting nitty gritty in some of them. And I love just the chance to explore cookbooks in a new light because for me, they do not spark a whole lot of cooking yet. Maybe they will. They do spark a little bit of baking, but they don't have to. If we read cookbooks as book books, then we can take whatever self-care element we want out of it without the guilt of needing to cook it, without the guilt of ever following through. It's just an opportunity to slow down and get that self-care and that personal growth in a way that other books can't give us. So, cookbooks as book books. I'm hoping that I've said that enough, that I have made that phrase stick in your head, and that you are going to give it a try. So, you know what I'm going to ask you now. What's your favorite cookbook? Do you have any cookbooks that you like to read as book books, and what are they? I'd love if you would let me know your personal experiences with this microgenre, how you get self-care and growth and transformation out of the cookbooks you read, and what your favorite books that you would recommend are. As always, you can find this episode online at alitlife.com, and you can leave your comments and book recommendations in the show notes. You can find this post for the episode on social media, and you can leave your comments there. And my favorite, head to the audio tool in your favorite podcast platform and send me a quick message, what you thought about this episode and what you would recommend for me to read next. And as a reminder, if you want to go a little bit deeper into this idea of cookbooks and recipes and all of the bigger ideas behind them, I did just release an episode in my Patreon community of a couple of different ways that you could take stock of the recipes that you have and celebrate them, savor them, and package them somehow so that you're leaving your own recipe legacy behind. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope it sparks something in you and you find someone else to say today, do you read cookbooks as book books? And it opens a fun conversation. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll see you inside the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. Learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing, if you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and it builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.